We have to stop looking like success on paper, but performing success to outrun our history, to outrun our past. We owe not only to the world, but to ourselves. We owe ourselves the luxury to be who we are. We all experience moments where someone else's words try to write our future life story. A moment where their lack of imagination or their lack of knowledge try to prevent us from overcoming an obstacle, from reaching our goals. Maybe you have experienced or had a moment where someone told you what you couldn't be, what you couldn't do. And I believe we all have had moments where someone has fed us a story, fed us this script that we never asked for. I am Tierra Burns, a licensed clinical social worker and therapist. Before I began helping people rewrite their narratives and reclaim their identities, I was in the living room being handed a story. Let's talk about it. I was around 11 years old when my aunt set me, my brothers, and my cousins down to have story time. She began to tell us about this lady who was abused by her husband. At the time, the lady had 2 kids and she was pregnant with her 3rd child. The lady had decided to leave the husband because the husband was still being abusive, was using drugs, drinking, all the different type of things. However, the lady was a faithful Christian. Every Wednesday and every Sunday, like clockwork, she was at the church. So the husband knew where to find her. He went down to the church trying to win her back, and she stood her ground. She told him no. And at that moment, in the church parking lot, he pulled out a knife and stabbed her in the neck. Till this day, the lady still has that wound. Then my aunt turned and looked at me. It felt like her eyes was piercing through mine, and she asked this question: "Do you know who that's about?" And so everybody's in the living room like, "No, no." And then she's like, "It's about your mom." And at that moment, I felt this sense of embarrassment, this sense of guilt, this sense of not knowing who I was. I remember getting up, running to my mom and asking questions because I had never heard that story. And my mom did confirm the story. But one of the things that really stuck with me was this story of I do not want to be a statistic. For some reason, at that young age, we knew the statistics of DV. We knew that a lot of times females get into relationships that are also domestically abusive, physically abusive. We also know that sometimes the men or the women, the females, can become abusive themselves. We know that females have promiscuous behaviors and all the different things. And so I vowed to myself, which was a trauma or a survivor vow, that I would not be a statistic. A trauma or survivor vow is basically this internal story, this internal promise of what you would never, ever be, what you would never, ever do. It's a vow, it's a promise formed in a response to pain, fear, and witness harm. And so I believe that many of us have built our identity on what has happened to us and trying to make sure we don't become our dad, our uncles, what our pastor said, what our teacher said, what the kids in school may have said about us. We are running from those narratives instead of being our authentic self. And so I really began to pivot when I realized that a lot of things that I was doing, a lot of the things that were successful to me, the reason why I felt empty at times was because I wasn't being honest with myself. I wasn't being authentically myself. Whatever was against not being a statistic is what I did. So while on the outside, I was very successful. On the outside, I was very responsible. I was able to take care of myself. On the outside, people were inspired and motivated to do similar things that I've done, but they didn't understand that a lot of the actions, a lot of the things that I was doing came from this idea of not wanting to be a statistic. And so to pivot, the first thing you have to do is you have to reflect. Self-awareness is your friend here. Self-awareness is where you can literally dig deep and be honest with yourself. Am I doing this because I don't want to become something that I saw in my past? Or am I doing this because this is really who I am and what I want to do? A lot of times, the reason why we switch our identity or we choose an identity of not becoming is because we are trying to fix what that story represents to us. So, in my case, my father being abusive towards my mom, I'm now fixing this representation that I come from a violent family. I come from a family that is dysfunctional, disorganized. And I had to prove that no, I don't come from a family that is dysfunctional. No, I don't come from a family that is abusive or violent. I come from a loving, caring, nurturing family. The thing about it too is when you tell yourself or you operate out of, I don't want to be a statistic or I don't want to be a thing, two things could be true. There could be loving and nurturing moments and still be this negative thing that happened in your family because not every family is perfect. The second thing is secret keeping. Things thrive, they breathe. Shame breathes and thrives in secret keeping. And so when the secret was, I don't know where my dad's at. I don't know where he's at. Don't ask no questions. My mom don't say nothing. But then also when I was asked about my dad, the story I told my friends, even though he did die, but that was the story I told everybody. He died. We can move on. Let's keep going. Didn't want to talk about it. Now, was it a lie? No. But I did omit the fact that he used to abuse my mom. Like there was more to it. He was in jail while I was a child. So I didn't really know him, not just because he died, but because he did some things that he had to go away. The last thing that we have to pivot is this pre-written narrative that a lot of us, while we are running away from the things that we saw and we are basing our identities on that, we are also the cycle breakers of our family. And so that has to be the story. That has to be the narrative that you want to carry and not just doing things out of, I don't want to be like grandma. I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be, I don't want to be, I don't want to be. I don't want to be who they said I was back in the day. We have to change the way we see ourselves and understand that we are a cycle breaker in these narratives. Now, here are the steps of reclaiming your identity. Because you have to shift from result to choice. So, not just asking, okay, if I do this, would the result be that I am in that narrative now, or am I against that narrative? But choosing to authentically show up, empowered, and truly who you are. Two, give yourself permission to take the mask off and unarmor. A lot of us have a hard time taking off the armor because if we take off the armor, we believe that we will become that thing or we won't be able to handle the different roles in life. So we keep the mask on, we perform, we pretend, and what we don't understand is we are silently killing and betraying ourselves because we won't honor who we truly are. Lastly, we have to reset our nervous system. This is like the most important thing because at the end of the day, resetting your nervous system, that's going to help you create a space where you feel safe to authentically be yourself, where you feel safe to reclaim your identity and rewrite the promise that you want to have for yourself. The promise shouldn't be your purpose in life is not just who not to be, what not to become. You are so much bigger than that. And so we have to stop looking like success on paper, but performing success to outrun our history, to outrun our past. Because we owe not only to the world, but to ourselves. We owe ourselves the luxury to be who we are. One of the things that I often tell my clients is to do a body scan. A lot of times when we are operating out of our identity or out of a trauma or survivor vow, we feel it in our body. The Body Keeps Score is one of the famous books that a lot of my clients have read. And so headaches and migraines are something that you may get if you are operating out of survivor, if you're operating out of a trauma vow or a trauma response. You may feel a tight chest. You may feel knots in your stomach. You may feel a clenched jaw, grinding. I used to grind all the time, which messes up your teeth. Um, and so you want to check in all those things, and you want to intentionally take deep breaths in all those different areas and tell yourself, I am safe. I am okay. I am safe. I am okay. The third thing you want to do is you want to rebuild trust with yourself. In order to rebuild trust with yourself, one, you have to start doing things consistently that honor you. A lot of us struggle. You may struggle to put things down. You may struggle to make the right decisions. You may struggle to be vulnerable or feel like you always need reassurance and validation because you do not trust yourself. Outside of the persona you created, you do not trust yourself to be anything else. And so now is the time to really put down all the facades and really choose to honor you by doing one or two things, small things, consistently that shows you, oh, I can trust me with me. I could trust my heart. I could trust that I could put these things down, these things that I thought I needed to protect myself, and be okay. I want to leave you with a practice. Honor your being and not just your feelings. One of the journal prompts this week that I want to give you is to ask yourself which part of my success is a performance for my past? And what would my life look like if I only lived from my being? Be honest with yourself because you deserve to be more than just your history. You deserve to be exclusively you.